Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome back your MC, Larry O'Connor.
Mercedes Schlapp, ladies and gentlemen, Mercedes Schlapp. And child. 7 or 8 of them there. All the Schlapps. Matt Schlapp is the Tevye of the conservative movement. 5 daughters. It's a Fiddler on the Roof joke. Thanks for playing along. I already said the Shabbat Shalom earlier. Come on, people, work with me. How was that dinner? Bellissimo, right? Wasn't that appearance by Mick Mulvaney fantastic with Matt Schlapp? That was great. And Matt, see, I told you, it's funny, there was a real debate this week over whether it should be Mick Mulvaney or Michael Cohen for the Q&A. Yeah. Well, it was decided that we should, when it comes to Michael Cohen, we should just let sleeping dogs lie. Couple of news items here. All of this is true and factual. I'm actually very excited to announce, this just happened in the last hour. In San Francisco, there has been an arrest made. His name is Zachary Greenberg. He was arrested for assaulting that conservative activist at the UC Berkeley campus. Now, if you're like me, you're wondering why it took 10 days for this arrest. I mean, we had the man's picture. We had the video of him punching this conservative activist. We're now learning why it took 10 days, or at least we believe we know why. It has also been revealed that he, for a short time, worked for UC Berkeley. I'm not kidding. As a lab assistant in the psychology department. Higher education. Who's the president of the UC system? Janet Napolitano. There are no jokes here. I'm telling you the truth. This is all what happened. Also in the news, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. Oh no, we love her. She is the best thing that ever happened to the Republican Party. I'm not kidding. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez has now threatened to put moderate Democrats on a primary list if they don't vote the way she tells them to vote. Right? Do it. Do it. Which actually begs the question, what does it take to be a moderate Democrat these days? What, it means you don't want to kill the child until it's been on the operating table for 2 hours versus immediately? What? I mean, which reminds me, also in the news, Ralph Northam is still governor of Virginia. Could we I just want to do an informal vote here, a poll. How many here thinks Ralph Northam was the guy in blackface? Pretty good. How many think he was in the Klan hood? How many thinks he was the guy who beat up Jussie Smollett? Kind of even across the board, actually. Doing a great job, Ralph Northam. Ralph Northam is making Terry McAuliffe look like the greatest governor in Virginia history. All right, that's it for the news. Now I'm very excited. Sorry? Huh? Still can't hear a word he's saying. I think it's better off that way. I'm very excited to introduce to you a man who many of you wake up to every morning. A whole lot of you. And many of you listen to on his nationally syndicated radio program, The Brian Kilmeade Show. And boy, this is the furthest thing from fake news. I have been in this business for about 9 years now, and I have met so many people in television, in radio, in journalism, and I have never found a person to ever say anything bad about this man. He is truly the nicest man in this business. Ladies and gentlemen, your keynote speaker, Brian Kilmeade.
It's the longest walk ever.
Huh?
Thank you for that. That was great, Larry. Very nice of you. Appreciate it. Hey, thanks so much for being here. A round of applause for Larry. How great is that? He's like Jerry Seinfeld responding to the news, writing instant jokes right there, and they're all hysterical. By the way, I was hoping for a bigger room, but I'll try to make do with this. Thanks also to Matt Schlapp for asking me to come down here, and Mercedes for signing off on it. I appreciate it. I wish Matt was a little busier this week, and he's responsive, having a good time, hanging out in the green room. So Matt comes up, he's on my radio show, and Matt came up to me and said, Brian, would you like to speak at CPAC? I said, absolutely. And then he said, what would you talk about? And I said, maybe I'll talk about myself. And he said, anything else? And I go, yeah, I do have something else. And if it's okay with you guys, I would like to put party politics aside for a second. I would like to stop talking about Republicans and Democrats for a moment. I want to stop talking about liberals and conservatives for just a minute. And here's why. Because I think we got to go back to this theme, what made America great. My series on Fox Nation is what made America great. So that means I'm going to be in litigation with Matt Schlapp because he kind of stole my theme. A lot of people sue everybody for everything, so why not? Let's have a few hearings. It'll be fun. And maybe sometimes I'll tell the truth. But listen, I digress. A few years ago, we had a president that couldn't answer this question, are we an exceptional nation? And his answer was essentially this. Well, every nation thinks they're exceptional. So that put me on a quest to prove America is not perfect, but man, we're great. And we're not great because we have great founding fathers. We're not great because we have impactful presidents or military generals. We're great because of the so-called average, everyday American people doing extraordinary things on a daily basis without getting a pat on the back or the attention they deserve. I'm talking about you guys. You're here to meet people, but fundamentally you're here because you care about the country. So now I think it's time to recalibrate, go back, and find out why you care about this country so much. It's not because you were born here. It's because you were born here and you realize when you got up in the morning, you're in the Super Bowl. And because you have a chance to play here and you have a chance to compete here, you're in the Hall of Fame. And we know we hit lotto when you became an American. So what I want to do is as you look to my left and look to my right, you see 3 books. I'm not here to talk about the books. I'm talking about here to talk about what's inside them. So George Washington's Secret 6. Well, let's go back. Oh, you'll see that. Other way. So here is George Washington's Secret 6. So what's going on in America right now is we decide we want to fight for freedom. And we go to Bunker Hill, and even though we lost, we won. The British leave Boston. But George Washington knows exactly what's next. They're coming to New York, and we got to be ready. And they're ready to go for the kill. And they square off with Washington for the first and only time. And Washington finds himself backed up in Brooklyn and knows, if I don't find a way to get my troops out of here, this war is over, and I'm dead, and so are my men. So he puts the word out, and barges show up, and ships show up, and crossing the Hudson will be his troops. But the problem is, the water's too rough. These ships can't get to him, and the sun has set, the night is here. He's got to get his guys out before the sun comes up, or this war is over, we're not in this room, this country doesn't exist. Suddenly, the water's calm, and his men start to leave by the thousand. But when the sun's about to come up, we still have a few thousand still in Brooklyn. And out of nowhere, a fog rolls in so thick you cannot see in front of your face. So I heard this story I wanted to verify this story, and I found that it's absolutely true, because the man who was shoulder to shoulder with Washington wrote it in his autobiography in 1820. He said, "You could not see the hand in front of your face." And because that fog rolled in out of nowhere, dare I say miraculously, our guys were able to get out, get through Manhattan, and save our fight for another day. So Washington escaped, but he's still got to take on the #1 power in the world, the #1 infantry, and they're going for blood. So he's got to get some spies, because you can't win without New York, and that's their headquarters. So he gets a spy. He asks for help. Does he get a soldier? No, he gets a teacher. And that teacher is Nathan Hale. He puts his hand up, and he says, "I'm in." The problem is, he doesn't know Long Island. He doesn't know how to spy. In 3 days, he lands in Huntington, says, "What are the British up to?" The British go, "I can't believe this guy." He's captured, and he's hung on 66th and 3rd. Game on. If you spy, you die. So who's going to want to step up and fight for America? Not even a country, this idea, against the world's #1 superpower. It's not going to take military generals. Yeah, they'll lead. Sure, Washington is special, but that won't be enough. He needs so-called average, everyday Americans who want to do an extraordinary thing, not for a country, but for an idea. George Washington needs spies, and he gets 6 of them. Look at James Rivington. How special is he? He's a printer. The guy in the middle is Benjamin Talmadge. He was the guy to the left shoulder and sometimes right shoulder of George Washington. He knew Long Island. He knew where to go. You look over to the right, Abraham Woodhull. He's a farmer. Look down there. There's a bartender, Austin Rowe. We have 355, a socialite. We think a single mom. And then we got this Caleb Brewster. Think of a sleeveless guy, kind of hairy, kind of a rock, kind of like The Rock without the Hawaiian descent. And he's going to paddle across the Long Island Sound, a longshoreman. We only have a sketch of Robert Townsend. He owned a grocery store. I can't relate to the greatness of Washington. That's why he's on Mount Rushmore. We're never going to meet a guy like that for generations. But America is not about Benjamin Franklin, George Washington, or Thomas Jefferson. It's about average, everyday American people doing extraordinary things for the idea of a country. So what do these guys do? They get behind enemy lines. And together, they were able to stop Benedict Arnold from giving away West Point. They were able to stop a counterfeit exchange that was supposed to deaden our currency and make our farmers and shopkeepers go home because we had no money. They were able to get the naval codes of the British and give it to the French to win the Battle of Yorktown. They were able to find out that the British knew that the French were coming into Rhode Island. They were about to be wiped out. So Washington staged a fake attack in New York to keep them home. That's all the farmer, the bartender, the longshoreman, the printer, the socialite. That's all they were able to do. The front page of my book is a quote from a lieutenant in the British Army. Washington didn't outfight us, he outspied us. This is the path they took for 4 years. They lived and died without any fame or acclaim. In fact, they took guff because they didn't fight in the war. Washington said, "I need you guys." They said, "What we need from you, Mr. General, is this, our anonymity. Don't ever tell anyone what we did." And he kept their secret, but he also kept their letters. And until 1930, this was top secret. Until Morton Pennypacker was able to put it all together, unmask it, we were able to get additional information and put it together. In the end, this is how innovative they were. I went to the CIA and I said, how did they do it? Through dead drops, through encryption, through code, through invisible ink. Can anyone understand what this means? If you caught me with that in my sock, that's the letter in my sock. This is what they learned in the middle of a war, a code, a secret language. Whatever, agreeable to 28, meant 723, not far from 727, received at 356, but on his return was under the necessity to destroy the same or be detected. I don't know what that means. You could go on your way. You know what it means? It means this. Jonas Hawkins, agreeable to appointment. Med Culper Jr., that's Robert Townsend, not so far from New York, received a letter, but on his return was under the necessity to destroy the same or be detected. There was no augmentation by the ship or war land forces. Everything stayed quiet. Do you understand what's going on? They are communicating in the rawest way possible, not with a BlackBerry, which would be tough for us, not with an iPhone, which sometimes run out of batteries, but finding an innovative way to tell Washington where to go and how to do it. By the time they were ready to take New York, they fell like a house of cards. The British don't even know what hit them. We win in 1783. They will not leave. In 1785, Washington goes, I'm taking New York. They left ahead of time. And this is where they went. After a few days, Washington goes, 1783, it's time for me to go home. I got to meet the men who helped me win this war, the officers. Tell them to go to France's Tavern, still in New York City today and featured on Fox Nation. He gathered them around. He looked out and he realized he made history. He started to talk, and Benjamin Talmadge wrote it down, or else we never would have known. Here's an excerpt. With a heart full of love and gratitude, I now take leave of you. I most devoutly wish that your latter days may be as prosperous and happy as your former ones have been glorious and honorable. Ladies and gentlemen, they just won the war. They just made history. They're the reason why we're here. A farmer, a shopkeeper, a printer, a bar owner, and a socialite came together because they had an idea that we should fight for freedom. And I got news for you. There was not a nation on the planet, not just the British, that wanted us to be successful. You want to know why? Because if you're a king or an absolute monarch, this whole democracy thing really not good for business. When's the last time you saw a queen run a really good campaign? Not really. So they want America to fail. We don't have a president. We got war debt. We don't have an army. We don't have a navy. This country's not going to work, but we have our first enemy. It's off the coast of North Africa. It's Tunisia, Tunis then, Algiers, Algeria now. It is Morocco, and it is this place called Tripoli. We know it as Libya. These nations see an easy mark in America, and they want to take our crews hostage, and they did. They want to take our ships, steal them, and they took them. They want to plunder our cargo, and they said, if you want to not have this happen again, pay tribute, pay a ransom. We don't want to do that. John Adams says, I can handle that. I'm going to go talk to him. Look at the route. We just want to be able to sell our stuff. You got a problem with Spain, England, Denmark, Norway. It's not us. And this is how agreeable they were. John Adams asked how the Barbary States could justify making war upon nations who had done them no injury. The response from the ambassador, according to the Quran, all nations which had not acknowledged the prophet were sinners, whom it was the right and duty of the faithful to plunder and enslave. We got an enemy. They're using the Quran against us. Has that ever happened before? Give me a second. So Adams tells Jefferson, help me out here. Adams saw the craziness in their eyes and said this, we ought not to fight them unless we want to determine to fight them forever. It's true. What does Jefferson say? If you don't punish the first insult, more will follow. America's being challenged. So what are we going to do? Are we going to throw in the towel? Well, let's get a president. Washington brings both these guys in and says, now that I'm president, what should I do? He hears both sides. He goes, all right, we don't have a navy. That makes it tough to fight. We don't have an army. We really don't have much money. Let's build 6 ships. I'll pay the tribute for now. We got to try to get our guys back. So he split the difference. When Adams became president, Adams goes, I'm not doing this. When Jefferson became president, he said, let it go. I'm not paying anything. Let them declare war on us. So they do. And guess what? Our Navy is disjointed. We don't have a good strategy. We tried to stranglehold them. We tried to escort. It wasn't working. But what does America do when things struggle? They adjust like every war, and they make the right choices. Those right choices are these men. You know Jefferson. You know Washington. Now meet the people that lived and died and were famous in their day, but were still reaping the rewards of their greatness. Edward Preble basically framed out the moral codes of the Navy. William Eaton, the first ground war to take Derna and almost take Tripoli in about 2.5 hours. Stephen Decatur, the first Navy SEAL. When the USS Philadelphia was taken, he takes 60 guys. They dress like Middle Easterners. They take the ship and blow it up to make sure it wasn't used against us. Stephen Decatur was going to be president. There's Decatur House here if he didn't get into a duel and get shot. We were shooting a lot of people back then, too. Presley O'Bannon. Any Marines here? The Marines know who Presley O'Bannon is. When it was time to go 500 miles through the desert with a bunch of mercenaries and a handful of Marines led by William Eaton, It was Presley O'Bannon that made sure that army formed into a tight unit to take Derna in 2.5 hours. Presley O'Bannon, who also played the fiddle, entertained the guys, and was fearless. When William Eaton got hurt, O'Bannon stepped up. And guess what happened? America takes these 4 nations, we get our guys back, and they end up paying us for the inconvenience. So what do? William Eaton's attitude kind of encapsulates it all. There's but one language which can be held to these people, and this is terror. And it's not the Muslim people of those areas, it's the pirates using the Quran as an excuse. Congress must send a force into the seas, at least to check the insolence of these scoundrels and to render them respectable. If America's elected officials are not resolved to fight Barbary, I hope they're resolved at their next session to wrest the quiver of arrows from the left talon of the eagle in their arms and substitute a fiddle bow or a cigar in lieu. So, we're a brand new country. We're 10, 15 years old. We're taking on these Islamic extremists while the rest of the European nations are writing checks. That's the people. These are the people that are our predecessors. That's what America's made out of. This is why people want to come here. It's not because we are great by nature, we try to earn it. It's not because we're perfect, it's that we're trying to be. And if you think that I'm sitting here as a Fox guy who's pro-American and patriotic, it's all true. But if you think I'm spinning the truth, read this. This is Pope Pius VII. And to me, if you've had 6 Pope Piuses, you wouldn't need a 7th, but that's not my choice. The Americans, with a small force in a short space of time, have done more for the cause of Christianity than the most powerful nations of Christendom have done for ages. That's your country. When we first put the ships out, they weren't coordinated, but we were determined to get it right. Who would ever do a land war in the Middle East and be successful? Us. Who would ever raise somebody like William Eaton, who would look at the stars and figure out how to go 500 miles without a compass, without GPS, but just the Waze app? Just kidding. So, what's been talked a lot about here is socialism. What America is about is not success. It's about the ability to try to achieve success however we define it. And that's what brings me to my next guy, Andrew Jackson. Why would I talk about a Democrat at CPAC? Because this is an American success story. There's only one country then and now where you can be an orphan at 13 and become an attorney general, a judge, a senator, a general, a war hero, and a 2-term president, and you're in it. Here's the story of Andrew Jackson. Whether you agree with his policies, all of them, some of them, or a few of them, this is an extraordinary story. There he is. This is how it's depicted. The Revolutionary War starts. So what does Andrew Jackson want to do? He's 13. Mom, can I go in? You're not going in. His older brother goes in. He dies of heat stroke. Him and his other brother, there's 1 year that separates between them. They decide to volunteer as a runner. They get spotted by the British. They track him back to his cousin's house. And they pick up the sword, and he says, "Clean my shoes." Andrew Jackson says, I'm a prisoner of war, sir. I don't have to do that. Down goes the sword. He blocks it with his hand, hits his head, and he keeps that scar the rest of his life. His other brother was not that lucky. He gets hit directly on the head, gets knocked out, never fully recovers. They walked 40 miles barefoot in the winter into prison camp. Their mom, determined to get him out, finds a way to get him out in a prisoner exchange. When he gets him out, by the time the 14-year-old gets back, he's dead. Andrew Jackson has just his mom left. His mom's got to earn a living during the war, so she volunteers to help domestically. Next thing you know, a trunk shows up on his porch. It's his mom's stuff. She dies. He is alone in a country that is unsettled, without food stamps, Social Security, without any health care, nobody to blame. You can't sue anybody. What do? It's America. You get raised by your village, your town, your county, your state, your country. And guess what happens? You have Andrew Jackson determined to do 2 things: pay back his country that raised him and pay back the British that wiped out his family. Enter the War of 1812. This attorney general, this judge, this esteemed lawyer, this militia general says it's about time. The British never fully accepted that they lost. Sounds like some candidates who never accept they lost. It's on the tip of my tongue. Never mind, I digress. In the middle of the country, the British were supposed to leave. They never left. They were radicalizing American Indian tribes who were terrorizing American settlers. On our ships, they were fighting the French. They needed some guys, so they started taking our guys right off our ships and then taking the ships. Utter disrespect, interrupting our trade lines because we wouldn't take a side in their war with France. So they're asking for a war. James Madison gives it to them. The war hawks enter in, and they vote. By 1813, we're going to the War of 1812, and that is great. The only problem, we don't have an army, we barely have a navy, and they are the #1 superpower on the planet, and they just finished off the British. They were hoping they would distract us. So Jackson goes, no problem, I got this. So Madison looks down south, and Armstrong, the Secretary of Defense, Secretary of War back then, goes, yeah, that backwoods guy, I don't want them. We got our own generals. Yeah, we had generals, they were terrible. And we thought it would be a great idea what we had of a standing army. We had a bunch of militias. Let's go fight them in Canada. So we leave the whole East Coast wide open. And every one of these neighboring cities gets terrorized from Philadelphia on south. They leave the North alone because they believe, and they're right, the North is saying, I'm out of here. I don't even want this war. I didn't vote for this war. So the British go, if we leave them alone, we could probably get them back. Now, if you look around and you say, well, this country's coming apart, what kind of future will we have? Ladies and gentlemen, when the North's about to leave, you have no standing army, the #1 superpower is bearing down on you with a navy that quadruples yours, and your generals have no experience, then our nation's in trouble. I'm not too worried now. Can you blame me? So Andrew Jackson goes, you ready to call on me yet? You've lost every other battle. All right, Jackson, you're in. So Jackson wins battle after battle after battle. But as you look at the map after the Battle of Baltimore, and we've realized the one thing we could do to be successful is take out their leaders, because without their leaders, they don't know what to do. He says this battle's going to be in New Orleans. They're going to divide the country. They're going to keep it and stop us growing past the Mississippi. Not my opinion. Ron Dress, an esteemed historian, a decorated Marine in New Orleans, found the paperwork in the British archives that showed they were going to abrogate the Treaty of Ghent, they were going to stop us at the Mississippi, and they were going to start putting settlements in, British settlements. They feared what we have become. They wanted to stop us then, unless some way this militia, this mishmash of a group of troops, these Americans who don't know how to quit, can get it together and stop them in New Orleans. Because if you control the mouth of the Mississippi, you control the Mississippi. So it was up to Jackson to put together that militia. Man, they were ready to fight. They combined with other forces, and they wiped out radicalized allied British tribes, Indian tribes. They took out the British in Pensacola, and it was a sprint over to New Orleans. Now, every once in a while, if you say to yourself, we're not a special country, we're not an exceptional nation, think about that fog. Think about the War of 1812. Think about that 13-year-old orphan that had this innate leadership skill that he could never have learned from a parent because he had none, who was fearless because he had no choice, who had this natural leadership ability to have these guys run through fire for him. Where did the British land? The exact wrong spot for them, the exact right spot for us. What did they do? Instead of charging straight ahead, that cocky group stayed there and encamped. What did Jackson do? Send some flatbed ships over there and started lobbing cannonballs at him. And while he did that, a whole town got shovels and dug a trench and built a wall. But he needed firearms. So in come the pirates. They say, guys, you're bandits. Jackson goes, I don't deal with bandits, I don't deal with criminals. He goes, we have guns, we have weapons, we have food. He goes, you're in. They line up. We have Choctaw Indians. We have Cherokee Indians, American Indians. We have regular militia. We got farmers. We have Tennessean sharpshooters. And together, Jackson drills them. As the forces begin to file into New Orleans in bright red outfits, Jackson is set. After a series of probes, they go all out. But they have a plan. After the probes fail by the British go, we're going to go up the river, we're going to come back behind them. The one thing the British didn't take into account, the current. So when they put the canoes in, they went the other way. When the fighting started, Jackson had just what he had straight ahead of him. What do we have? We had the burning of Washington to the ground, and we had a battle. In the end, in under 40 minutes, Jackson's crew beat the army that just defeated Napoleon. Everyone except Wellington was there, including his brother-in-law. And by the way, if you have a mission that's tough to win, send your brother-in-law. Who gets killed almost immediately, by the way. We wiped out all their officers. Look at these numbers. We had half the number of troops. We lost 39 guys. 1,262 British were blown apart. 484, they're still trying to find body parts. Killed in action, we lose 13. 291 British, you see. We killed their generals, their colonels, and 75 officers. By the time they went to surrender, Jackson kept sending the guy back. He said, don't send me Major Lambert, send me your senior officers. He says, sir, you killed them all. How do you win a fight like that? You win a fight like that if there's some way, somehow, this planet's a better place. Civilization's a wonderful place to be. If one nation is a beacon of freedom, the potential for prosperity and democracy, there has to be a reason why we keep winning. If you ask Jackson, Jackson said, the first thing I did when I got to town, I went to a convent, the Ursuline nuns. He said, I went there and I said, can you pray for our success? They said, if you guys win, can we stay? Jackson says, absolutely. We're praying, and we're going to take the second half, and we're going to make it a hospital. And they did. Every day on January 8th, every year on January 8th, they come out and bang pots and pans because they believe, like Jackson believed, that God shined on them above and made sure that America would live, and America would survive, and America would thrive. We would never be invaded again. Why is that? Because we were here to stay. And our biggest enemy became our number one ally. Because if you don't have us on our side, you're going to be in trouble. And what does it show? Through time when we were our weakest, we were willing to stand up to a bully. At a time when we were beginning to gain strength, we were willing to make sure no one got in our way. And when we became the world's superpower, all we're looking to do is help people have the same opportunities that we have. Yeah, do we make mistakes? Sure. But they're hustle mistakes. And later, Jackson would come back on the anniversary of the battle. And this whole thing that they taught us in school, that this war didn't have to be fought, that the battle didn't have to be won, is wrong. And here's what Jackson said 25 years later. General Pakenham is their leader, who is the brother-in-law of Wellington. If General Pakenham and his 10,000 matchless veterans could have annihilated my little army, he would have captured New Orleans, centured all the contiguous territory. Through the technicality of a war, Great Britain would have immediately abrogated the Treaty of Ghent, would have ignored Jefferson's transaction with Napoleon. They wanted to reverse the Louisiana Purchase. When you read this and study this, you get chills up your spine. And you say to yourself, why is it that we always find a way? World War II starts. We don't have an army. We don't have a military. We have the wrong generals. We get the right military, the right army, the right generals, and we win. When we don't win, we learn from it and we move on. Our intentions are always pure. I wish there would be another nation that could do that. The reason why we seem to be fighting and coming apart is because we all have one objective. We want to be better, and we have different approaches to doing that. If we could all agree that this is a great country that's trying to get better every day, the fighting would cease. The more decorum would come back. And we'd understand these are issues, it's not personal. And my sense is, the more we look back, the more we understand today. If you think we're coming apart, understand where we were, how unlikely it is that we're still here, and how unlikely it is that we, for the longest time, all of our lifetimes, we've been the number one economic and military power in the world. And we don't put it in everybody's faces, but we feel this extra responsibility to watch their back. There's a reason to be proud of this country. I don't care if you're a sheet metal worker, if you're lucky enough to get this great job as anchor at Fox. I know how lucky I am on a daily basis, but there's pride in effort. There is glory in trying. And if you don't succeed, the reason why we're still happy is because we believe we are. The reason why we see people in big cars and used to not get jealous is because in our mind, we think that could be us one day. And if it doesn't, at least I can know I gave everything possible to make it happen. We owe it to these people to keep this going. So I just believe if we could start every day knowing that America is great, trying to get better, I think you could see where we came from, you respect where we are, and you also understand one thing. I also believe our leaders need some room to sometimes cut some compromises. As Van Jones was here on this stage, and I watched it and we ran those clips today, he disagrees with the president on 95% of the things, but on an opportunity to do a deal, he did a deal. When it comes to immigration and health care, we're going to have to do a deal to get 60, the House and the White House is like hitting a half-court shot on a buzzer beater. It's not going to happen that often. So understand, take pride in who you are, and know this. This country often studies those who make history, but they wouldn't make history without us. Understand the important role you play. The fact that you're here shows how much you care. You're every bit as important to the people we study on our walls in our history books. So I always say, keep history alive. And let me just add one more thing. I have one more announcement. Thomas Jefferson backs up what I said. If you want to know about, I got some blowback on Jackson. What do these guys have in common? Harry Truman has a full-life statue of him in his library. Teddy Roosevelt wrote a book about him because he wanted to be more like him, a Republican. The guy in the middle rings a bell, his name's on the tip of my tongue. He insisted on getting his picture taken next to Jackson on the cover of Time magazine. Abraham Lincoln studied the way Jackson handled secession, and FDR, suffering from polio, days before the World War II was about to start, insisted on snapping his braces and walking through Hermitage so he could channel Jackson in a time in which our life was in peril. And the book rolls out, and guess who's most like Andrew Jackson? The man that was an outsider, that people said wasn't worthy, that everyone was convinced was not going to win, like Jackson, won. The guy over our heads is Andrew Jackson. The guy in the Oval Office is President Trump. He always put up with headwinds. Jackson thrived on the headwinds. He didn't let it bother him, never took a backward step. And that reminds me much of President Trump, whose first big presidential trip was to the Hermitage to check him out. And if you want to know what else makes America great, you're seeing it for the first time. That's going to be rolling out in October. Sam Houston and the Alamo Avengers. How a huge loss turned into Texas's win and America's gain. So I cannot thank you enough. This is one of the honors of a lifetime to be here, to be on C-SPAN, to be able to close out a dinner that consisted of meat and fish. Why ask if you can serve both? And to be asked by Matt to be a keynote speaker when I know at the heart he doesn't really like me that much. And I'm only kidding. And to be here today, to be part of you guys. This is the first time I'm at CPAC, and guess what? I'm coming back. So thanks so much. Have a great night. And I'll signing books outside. But thank you very much for being here, everybody.
That was awesome. God, you're good. Great job. You were great. Yes, yes, yes. All of that will be on the test. Bellissimo. You guys are such a great crowd. I got to tell you, I mean, last year sucked. Last year's crowd was like, is this a crowd or a painting? What do we got in front of me here? The only thing I heard back was like this one couple, like right around there. He said, who is this guy? And she says, he's on the radio right before Mark Levin. I don't know why suddenly I'm doing the Catskills. And he says, oh, it's Hannity? It doesn't look like Hannity. And she says, no, they made a change at the WMAL, and and that was all I heard, and I felt great about that. Bellissimo. It's, you remember when Dances with Wolves came out, that movie? Remember? It was awesome, right? And they had all the different, like, there was Dances with Wolves, and then there was Standing with Fists, and everybody had to come up with their own. It was so weird. I don't know why I did it, but it was like my Indian name at the time. I'm sorry, my Native American name at the time. My Elizabeth Warren name at the time was actually Elizabeth Warren. No, it's a better joke, though, but it's too late. I'm already down this road. My Native American name was Dragging Canoe. I have no idea, and I don't know why. It just sounded great, right? I get something extra for that, right? A little? You got it, buddy. All over it. I just want the ammo, to be honest with you. All right. It's amazing. Matt Schlapp is actually part of our next little presentation here, a very important one. And it doesn't get more CPAC than this. Right now, Matt Schlapp is doing a live television hit in the back of the room. So that's pretty great. So I have one new, I know you want to start. Hang on. I have another news item, and I kid you, this is the truth. This is no fake news. This is the truth. On January 20th, the Washington Post ran a story about how young high school boys from Covington High School wearing MAGA hats had confronted and surrounded a Native American Vietnam War veteran, taunting him and stopping him from being able to proceed at the Lincoln Memorial. We remember this story. That's how the Washington Post reported it. Now, of course, we all learned the truth very quickly that everything I just told you, and I mean everything, including the Vietnam War veteran part, was a lie, was, say it with me, fake news. I am not joking. Just 3 hours ago, that was January 20th. January 20th is when they ran that story. 3 hours ago today, on March 1st, the Washington Post has issued a correction to its reporting. This is subsequent reporting. A student statement and additional video allow for a more complete assessment of what occurred, either contradicting or failing to confirm accounts provided in that story, including that Native American activist Nathan Phillips was prevented by one student from moving on, that his group had been taunted by the students in the lead up to the encounter, and that the students were trying to instigate a conflict. In other words, the entire story was wrong. And they've just now put forth a correction. So I ask you, CPAC, do you think that fixes this? Do you think the lawsuit should end? The lawyer for Nick Sandman, the young boy, agrees with you. And he said the lawsuit will continue. I am now honored to present the folks who will be giving out the annual Ronald Reagan Award. Please welcome the American Conservative Union Foundation Vice Chair, Millie Hallow, and the American Conservative Union Executive Director, Dan Schneider.
Bring Matt out. Thank you, Larry. And there's a handheld here.
And the chairman. Is this on?
Yes.
Okay. Brian Kilmeade had many interesting things to say. Near the very end, he said, "We here owe a duty to those heroes who fought and died for us." I think that's what this next award really is about.
Thank you. The Ronald Reagan Award, which has always been the culmination of the Reagan banquet, for about 15 years. 15 years ago, the American Conservative Union established this award, thanks to Helen Kriebel, a number of other sponsors, and now Van Hipp. Its purpose was to recognize grassroots activism in the pursuit of conservative values and principles, sometimes despite overwhelming odds. In other words, courage. Courage under fire. Our winner this year exemplifies that. And I'm going to have her come up, and I'm going to tell you stuff about her. This year, the 2019 Ronald Reagan Award goes to Cassie Dillon. Come on up, Cassie. As she's coming up, there was this article written about Cassie about a year ago. Quote, this describes Cassie: pro-life, pro-NRA, pro-Trump, may not exactly spell millennial to many people, but 22-year-old Cassie Dillon isn't your average college student. A journalist, a political commentator, a social media influencer, with then, a year ago, 53,000 followers and counting. She was a senior at that great conservative bastion, Mount Holyoke College in Massachusetts. She was the founder of a blog called Lone Conservative, which provides a voice to right-leaning students who feel ostracized for their political views. This young woman was the only conservative in sight on that campus, and on her own, with her own resources, she was able to establish this voice and even found a way to ante up the $2,000 on her own to be an exhibitor at CPAC. Well, yes, and now, a year later, she's graduated, and she has continued her work as president of the Lone Conservative, which now has over 103,000 followers. She continues this passion even while she is now fully and actively and excitedly employed by Ben Shapiro's Daily Wire as an opinion journalist and political commentator. In other words, she is fully committed as a conservative, and she is the Ronald Reagan example of now millennial activism. We applaud her and we encourage her. Cassie, yes!
Thank you. I am so surprised. I had no idea that was going to happen. Thank you so much.
Your boyfriend knew.
All right, Larry O'Connor, come down, save us, and close down the program.
Eat dessert in the back, enjoy the music. Secret Service is going to come close us down, so enjoy. Larry.
Hey, that was great. I had Cassie on my show once. You know what she did? She actually reported on the southern border, right? Actually went down. I couldn't find another reporter who did this. Went down and interviewed ICE agents about what would be best to protect the border to keep people from crossing illegally. They said a wall, believe it or not. Cassie Dillon made that interview happen. And in that spirit, I just want to take a quick moment to acknowledge a very important thing. I would not be standing here today. I would not be on the radio or doing anything that I'm doing right now if a person had not discovered me and plucked me out of obscurity and had faith in me and believed in me and said, your voice is important, you shouldn't hide, you should go out and do the best you can do. That was 9 years ago. His name was Andrew Breitbart. And Andrew Breitbart will forever be connected to this stage and this event, CPAC, as some of his most incredible speeches and moments happened at this event. And I think it's all but fitting to acknowledge the fact that tonight we mark the 7th anniversary of his untimely passing. So if you have a drink on your table, if you could raise one, please. 7 years after his passing, to Andrew Breitbart. And with that, please stay for dessert and drinks and coffee and dancing and drink as much as you want for Andrew. Thank you so much, everyone. Good night.